It all begins with Ford and their new car, the Mustang. 1965 was the year that Ford came in and shook the world. It was the car to have, and everybody wanted one. Car lovers everywhere were talking about it, but there was one person that wanted to make it better. Lee Iacocca, the president of Ford at the time. So he decided to go to the man, the only man that can do it, the legend Carroll Shelby. And make it better he did. I'm Mike, this is Yobozi, here we go. The American racing legend, the gangster of car culture, and the Jordan of road racing. It all started January 11th, 1923. A simple, ordinary couple gave birth to an ordinary kid. That kid was Carroll Shelby. He had an ordinary life, but Carroll Shelby didn't want ordinary, and his passions proved it. At a young age, Carroll Shelby had a fascination with cars and planes. Working on his father's car as a teenager and driving it, Shelby found his passion, and that was the start of his career. Carroll Shelby, the guy that makes cars better. Not content with his already Cobra powered by Ford, he now came up with a Ford powered by Cobra. The Ford he took was the fastback Mustang, so Shelby put in his famous motor, the Cobra motor, into this Mustang. Now this isn't the more famous car, the Shelby GT500, or more commonly called Eleanor, but this was the original Shelby Mustang, its older sibling, the GT350. Now the GT350 was a road-going version of NASCAR, equipped with a 1-inch roll bar across the front suspension, Koni adjustable shock absorbers, decambered front suspension, an altered steering capacity which increased it by 14%. It was altering the geometry of the whole turning radius, complete with all new suspension components, 6-inch wide wheels for the safe and sustained speeds at 130 miles an hour. It had special brakes. It was a 289 cubic inch V8 motor that produced 271 horsepower. And with a higher performance package, it had brand new headers, a higher riser manifold that produced 306 horsepower, all included with a 4-barrel carb. This thing was completely set up. It had a fiberglass hood, 329 foot-pounds of torque. It was the nearest thing to a race car that you can buy. The GT350 was an icon. It was burning through the racetracks. It was beating every other car out there, and it was shocking. It's the story of a true American underdog becoming victorious. The GT350 was an icon for 5 years, and it got the attention of all the other auto manufacturers out there. It birthed the muscle car era and started the pony car war. But Shelby knew he could make his new icon better, and so he moved on to make his next icon, the GT500, or more commonly known, Eleanor. Shelby was now known, and auto manufacturers wanted his input on everything. He worked with Oldsmobile, Dodge, Chevy, pretty much every auto manufacturer out there, some known and some unknowns out there. Basically anything successful Dodge or Ford made, he had his hands in it. It was a good run for the GT350. This car was a staple for the road cars out there. You can take it to the track, go beat a Porsche, come back home, and take it to the grocery store the next day. Shelby has set his mark on the stage, and he was the one to talk to make cars better. After his long and extensive career, Ford decided they wanted to bring the GT350 back, and that was in 2010. But there was a problem. The 2010 Mustang had the 4.6 liter motor in it, and Shelby didn't want that. He wanted the 5.0 motor, so making the car had to be pushed back for another season. But there'll be a new model for fall of 2011. So Shelby and Ford worked together again. So they made the new 5.0 Shelby Mustang. They supercharged it and put all the bells and whistles on again. It had a standard 525 horsepower, did 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds, which at the time was crazy fast for that car. It had a new racing suspension, 6-piston front brakes, Borla exhaust. It was a true Shelby. It even had an optional R version, which was basically a tune for the car that made the car 624 horsepower. The problem was, this car, it wasn't a production car. They had a maximum of 2,200 cars that they wanted to sell. It didn't have the same appeal as the original. The car cost $63,000 at a minimum, and one of the most rarest Shelbys out there. Now, I saw recently this car sold for $169,000, but I have seen some other ones out there that are not much more than the original sticker price. That's not bad for such an iconic car. Shortly after that, sadly, we lost Carroll Shelby. He passed away in May of 2012. His life had become a full circle. It was the first car Ford went to him to make, and it was the last car Ford went to him to make. And both cars share the same DNA. One thing's for sure, Carroll Shelby is the man and the name everybody wanted help from. Now, after that rendition of the GT350, Ford made their GT500. They started in 2011 and continued on to 2014, and sadly, Ford decided to discontinue the GT500 for the time being. Now, 2015 came around and Chevy pulled out their new Z28, a very light car, 7.0 motor, high RPM, and just became a track monster. This thing went to the track and was beating all kinds of cars that were 10 times its amount. It took the Nuremberg track by storm. So Ford decided it's time to take the crown away from Chevy. And Ford had a new trick up its sleeve, the all-new GT350. Now, this car was not the successor of the previous GT500. This thing was a track monster. With a new approach to racing, muscle cars were competing with some of the top dog track cars out there. The Nuremberg track, the Super Bowl of race cars, and where every car gets tested and everybody's got their eyes on you. So Ford goes out there, takes a couple of cruising laps, and then unleashes its pure fury. The new Shelby GT350R did the best lap time. This was mind-boggling. An American, a Mustang, coming out here and beating these Italian cars or these track beasts out here? It was shocking, and it definitely reminded everybody of the 1965 GT350, which was a staple for racing. This brand new GT350R was beating some of the most top dogs out there, biggest names, and it looked good doing it, and it did it with American swag. This car beat the Porsche Carrera GT, the Porsche 911 GT3, the Pagani Zonda F, the Lexus LFA, and the Nissan GT-R V-Spec, a car they called Godzilla. The GT350R beat and took down Godzilla. It wasn't just a win for the new GT350R. It was a staple for the road racers out there. Ford was now turning the heads of all the car manufacturers out there and created a whole new set of standard for all the auto manufacturers out there. Now, it's important to note, all these cars were mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, or some all-wheel drive. They were a lot lighter, they were 10 times the amount, and they were being beat by a classic all-American rear-wheel drive front motor car. Let me put it to you a different way. The new Shelby Mustang GT350R was the Karate Kid showing up to the Nuremberg track. It looked like the Wimpy Kid that just beat everybody. But little did they know, it was groomed and trained by the Mr. Miyagi of racing, a Mr. Carroll Shelby. This car was equipped. It had a brand new 5.2 liter motor, flat crank, and produced 505 horsepower. Rear-wheel drive, classic Mustang, some bells and whistles, brand new brakes, a typical Shelby build. One thing's for sure, Ford knew if they had put Shelby's name on their car, they had to deliver. They had to. it was Shelby's name on the car. He would have to approve. And so they had to deliver. There's immense pressure putting the king of the racing world's name on your car. And I think Carroll Shelby would have definitely approved. I want to end this video with a quote from Carroll Shelby. And he said, quote, "It was fun to blow off a Porsche in a $3,900 donkey." Well, that's the video on the GT350. One of the best comeback cars. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time, deuces.